The most dangerous mistake in law enforcement is not what you see, but what you assume in the first 30 seconds. The morning rush at Los Angeles International Airport moved like a living river, travelers pulling suitcases across polished floors, announcements echoing through high ceilings, and security officers scanning faces with routine precision. Among the crowd stood Officer Daniel Mercer, a field supervisor with 8 years of airport security experience, known for his attention to detail and strict adherence to procedure. Beside him was Officer Ryan Collins, younger, faster to judge, and eager to prove himself during what was expected to be a routine shift. Their attention shifted toward a woman walking calmly through the international arrivals corridor. She was a black woman in her early 30s, wearing a tailored dark blazer over a simple white blouse, her posture steady and controlled, her expression calm but focused as she moved with purpose through the terminal. She carried no visible signs of distress, only a structured carry-on bag and a document folder secured under her arm. Collins noticed her first, narrowing his eyes as he observed her bypass a secondary inspection point after a brief interaction with a customs officer. He leaned slightly toward Mercer and muttered that something did not feel right, suggesting she matched a vague alert profile flagged earlier that morning. Mercer hesitated, studying the woman more carefully. There was nothing overtly suspicious about her behavior, yet something about the quiet confidence in her movement made the situation feel unusually important. As she reached the end of the corridor near the exit gates, Collins made the call to initiate a standard compliance stop, and Mercer followed protocol, signaling her to pause. The woman complied immediately, turning toward them with a calm expression that carried neither surprise nor fear, only quiet attentiveness. Collins approached first, asking routine questions about her travel origin, purpose, and luggage contents. She responded clearly, her voice steady, providing identification and travel documents without hesitation. Mercer examined her paperwork while Collins continued to observe her reactions, searching for inconsistencies that did not appear. Despite the lack of evidence, Collins insisted on a more thorough inspection, convinced that something was being missed. The woman did not argue or resist, instead, she maintained composed silence, waiting as procedures escalated around her. Passengers nearby began to slow their pace, noticing the interaction but not understanding its context. Mercer requested verification from the central database while Collins stood guard, maintaining distance but not lowering his suspicion. Within minutes, the atmosphere shifted subtly as Mercer's expression changed while reviewing the return data. The woman standing calmly before them was not just a traveler under routine observation. She had recently been appointed as the new deputy police captain assigned to oversee airport security operations, arriving earlier than scheduled to observe field procedures without prior announcement. The realization created a sudden and uncomfortable silence between the officers as the assumptions made in the previous minutes began to collapse under verified facts. The woman's expression remained unchanged, but her eyes now carried quiet authority as she watched them process the information that had just redefined the entire encounter. The terminal at Meridian International Airport was already under strain that morning, with delayed flights stacking up and passengers moving through security in slow, uneven waves, but nothing drew attention quite like the sudden presence of uniformed officers gathering near Gate C-12. At the center of it all was a woman moving with calm precision, her posture steady, her expression unreadable as she stood with her carry-on placed gently at her feet. Her name was Captain Lauren Mitchell, though at that moment no one around her seemed aware of the significance behind that title. To the officers approaching her, she was simply another traveler flagged for additional screening after a routine scan raised questions about an unidentified item in her luggage. The lead officer, Deputy Ryan Cole, stepped forward with a practiced tone, his voice firm but not yet aggressive, asking her to confirm ownership of the bag. Lauren responded without hesitation, her voice calm and measured, confirming that it was hers and requesting clarification on the issue. Around them, passengers slowed their pace, sensing tension but not fully understanding its source. The airport speakers continued announcing departures in the background, creating an odd contrast to the growing focus at the checkpoint. Deputy Cole signaled for a secondary inspection, and 2 additional officers moved in, beginning the careful process of opening the luggage. Lauren did not resist, nor did she show concern, instead watching quietly as protocol unfolded. The officers exchanged brief remarks about irregular readings from the scanning system, mentioning what they believed could be restricted contents, though nothing had yet been confirmed. As the inspection continued, subtle inconsistencies began to appear, not in the luggage itself, but in the way the situation was being interpreted. Lauren's identification had not yet been fully reviewed, and her presence was being processed as routine rather than exceptional. What none of the officers realized was that internal airport security coordination had already escalated the matter beyond their current clearance level, and that her arrival had been anticipated by federal authorities assigned to a separate briefing upstairs. Still, on the ground, the assumption of standard procedure guided every action. Lauren remained composed, her eyes scanning the environment with quiet awareness, noting not just the officers in front of her but the subtle shifts in communication happening over their radios. A second supervisor approached, leaning in to review the alert details, his expression tightening slightly as he read deeper into the system notes. The words were vague, referencing an unverified anomaly tied to the luggage tag, but nothing concrete. Even so, the tone of the situation began to shift, becoming more formal, more restrictive. Lauren finally spoke again, asking a simple question about which protocol was being applied and whether her identification had been processed through federal clearance channels. The question lingered in the air, met with hesitation rather than answer. Around them, the terminal continued its rhythm, unaware that the moment unfolding at gate C12 was about to challenge every assumption being made in real time. The moment Deputy Ryan Cole received confirmation from the secondary inspection unit, the atmosphere around gate C12 shifted in a way that was subtle but unmistakable, as if the environment itself had tightened its focus on the woman standing calmly beside her luggage. Lauren Mitchell remained still, her posture unchanged, but her attention sharpened as she observed the change in coordination among the officers. A brief exchange occurred over the radio, words clipped and procedural, referencing a higher-level clearance check that had just been initiated from an internal federal channel. The supervisor who had approached moments earlier straightened slightly, glancing between the device in his hand and the woman in front of him, as uncertainty began to replace the earlier confidence in routine protocol. Nearby passengers continued to move past, though several had slowed down, sensing that something beyond a standard luggage inspection was unfolding. Deputy Cole adjusted his stance, now speaking with a more cautious tone as he asked Lauren to remain in place while the verification process continued. She acknowledged the request without resistance, her expression steady, but her eyes tracking every movement with quiet awareness. Above them, the airport monitors continued to display boarding updates, creating a stark contrast between ordinary travel activity and the concentrated scrutiny forming at the gate. The secondary inspection team confirmed that the flagged item in her luggage had no direct match in prohibited categories, but the system anomaly still required escalation due to mismatched identity verification timing. This detail caused a noticeable pause among the officers, as procedural certainty began to give way to interpretation and reassessment. Lauren then calmly reiterated her question regarding which authority level was currently handling her clearance, emphasizing the importance of correct jurisdictional protocol. Her tone remained controlled, neither confrontational nor emotional, yet it carried a weight that prompted the supervisor to step slightly aside and speak into his radio again. The communication that followed was brief but decisive, instructing all personnel at Gate C12 to maintain standard containment procedure until federal confirmation was completed. The word containment was not unusual in airport security language, but its application in this context subtly altered the posture of everyone present. Deputy Cole exchanged a glance with his colleague, now visibly aware that the situation had moved beyond a routine search. Lauren's identification was rechecked through a handheld terminal, and within moments, a response began to populate the screen indicating pending verification from a federal oversight division. The officer reviewing it hesitated, realizing that the system was not flagging suspicion, but rather confirming delayed recognition of an authorized arrival. The realization did not immediately resolve the situation, but it began to reframe it. Lauren remained composed, her presence unchanged, as the officers around her shifted from inspection to acknowledgement of procedural oversight. The environment at Gate C12, once defined by routine airport movement, now held a quiet tension rooted in misunderstanding gradually giving way to recognition. The escalation at Gate C12 unfolded with a quiet intensity as the airport security team transitioned from uncertainty into structured coordination, each officer now responding to updated instructions arriving through secured federal channels. Lauren Mitchell remained at the center of the scene, her presence unchanged, standing with calm control as the procedural environment around her adjusted in real time. Deputy Ryan Cole received a direct update on his handheld terminal, and the expression on his face shifted slightly as the system completed a higher-level clearance sync, replacing earlier anomaly flags with an active identity verification match. The supervisor, now positioned slightly behind the main line of officers, lowered his voice as he confirmed the updated status with dispatch, his tone reflecting careful attention rather than urgency. Around them, the movement of travelers continued, but the focus at the checkpoint had become concentrated and deliberate, as if the space itself had narrowed around the verification process. A senior airport security liaison arrived within moments, carrying a tablet that displayed expanded credential data linked to federal assignment records. As the information loaded, there was a brief silence among the officers, not out of confusion, but out of the realization that the individual they had been processing under standard procedure was registered under a classification requiring immediate procedural adjustment. Lauren finally spoke again, her voice even and professional, asking for confirmation that her clearance had been fully recognized under the correct operational channel. The senior liaison reviewed the screen carefully, then acknowledged that the earlier classification had been incomplete due to delayed synchronization between airport security systems and federal assignment databases. This explanation prompted an immediate correction in protocol, and the containment posture that had been maintained since the initial inspection was formally lifted. Deputy Cole stepped slightly aside, now addressing her with a tone that reflected respect and formality, requesting confirmation steps only required for documentation closure rather than active inspection. Lauren complied without hesitation, providing the necessary verification inputs while maintaining her composed demeanor. The officers nearby adjusted their positions, no longer forming a perimeter but instead transitioning into standard procedural spacing consistent with cleared personnel status. The atmosphere at the gate changed noticeably, the earlier tension replaced by structured efficiency as systems updated across multiple terminals. The supervisor gave a final acknowledgement over the radio, confirming that the situation had been resolved and reclassified as a delayed recognition event rather than a security concern. Lauren's identity was fully confirmed within the federal system, and the airport records were updated accordingly. As the officers completed their final steps, there was a subtle shift in perception among those present, recognizing that the individual they had briefly treated as a subject of inspection was in fact operating within a higher authorization framework. The scene concluded with normal airport operations resuming around Gate C12, while the last of the verification alerts cleared from the system displays. The moment the verification status cleared at Gate C12, the environment shifted into a controlled post-incident procedure, where every movement became quieter and more deliberate. Lauren Mitchell remained in place for a few seconds longer, observing the final adjustments being made across the airport security terminals as her identity profile completed full synchronization across all connected systems. Deputy Ryan Cole stepped back from the primary position, now operating in a standard support role while the senior liaison finalized the documentation trail. A soft notification tone echoed from multiple devices as the clearance update propagated through the airport network, confirming that the earlier alerts had been fully resolved and archived under administrative review. Lauren's attention remained steady, her posture unchanged, as she reviewed the final confirmation screen presented by the liaison, ensuring that every detail matched her assigned federal credentials. Around her, the officers who had been part of the initial response began returning to their routine positions, restoring normal passenger flow through the checkpoint lanes. The supervisor issued a brief verbal confirmation that operations were resuming standard protocol, signaling the end of any active security engagement related to the incident. Travelers who had paused nearby continued moving forward, collecting their belongings and proceeding toward boarding areas as the atmosphere returned to normal airport rhythm. Deputy Cole offered a final formal acknowledgement, ensuring that all procedural requirements were satisfied before stepping aside completely. The senior liaison closed the verification file on the tablet, noting that the resolution would be recorded as a system lag in interagency clearance synchronization, rather than an active security violation. Lauren then proceeded through the cleared pathway without interruption, her presence now fully integrated into the airport's verified status system. As she moved forward, the remaining officers completed their final observational checks, confirming that no further action was required. The terminal lights and boarding announcements resumed their usual cadence, reinforcing the return to standard operations. In the background, the security checkpoint screens updated one final time, reflecting the cleared status across all monitored points, marking the full closure of the event. After the terminal had fully returned to normal operations, the atmosphere inside the airport settled into a calm but slightly heightened awareness, the kind that follows any brief security escalation. Lauren Mitchell continued walking forward through the main corridor, her presence now blending seamlessly with the standard flow of travelers and airport personnel. Her expression remained composed, reflecting a controlled awareness rather than urgency, as she observed the subtle changes in behavior among nearby staff who were still mentally processing the earlier events. Behind her, Deputy Ryan Cole completed the final verification of the clearance log, confirming that all procedural entries had been correctly updated and digitally sealed. The senior liaison from airport security remained at the central console, reviewing system diagnostics to ensure that no additional alerts would trigger from residual synchronization delays. As Lauren approached the exit corridor leading toward the secure transport area, her communication device issued a soft confirmation tone, indicating that her status had been fully restored across all federal databases. She paused briefly, acknowledging the update without breaking stride, then continued forward with steady confidence. The surrounding environment reflected complete operational recovery, with boarding announcements resuming at full volume and passenger movement returning to normal density across all gates. A few nearby officers exchanged quiet remarks, noting how quickly the situation had resolved once the verification system corrected itself. No further interventions were required, and all security personnel transitioned back into standard monitoring roles. Lauren's path remained unobstructed as she passed through the final checkpoint boundary, where the last of the temporary alerts had been formally cleared. The lighting along the corridor shifted slightly as she moved beneath overhead sensors, which automatically registered her as a fully authorized federal officer in transit. Behind her, the airport continued its routine cycle of arrivals and departures, with no remaining indication of the earlier disruption. The entire sequence concluded with full system normalization, leaving only routine activity across the terminal and a restored sense of procedural order. The corridor lights along Terminal B maintained their steady rhythm as Lauren Mitchell continued toward the restricted transport exit, her pace measured and unhurried, reflecting full confidence in the resolution of the earlier misclassification. Behind her, the airport had fully returned to standard operational flow, with no remaining alerts active on any public or internal monitoring systems. Travelers moved freely through security lanes, and staff members resumed routine coordination without interruption. Lauren briefly adjusted the strap of her carry case, her posture remaining upright and professional as she crossed into a quieter section of the terminal reserved for authorized personnel movement. Ahead, the secure transport access door stood open, indicating that her arrival had already been registered by the internal scheduling system. A technician stationed near the control panel acknowledged her presence with a subtle nod, confirming that her credentials had been validated across all required clearance layers. She responded with a calm acknowledgement and continued forward, entering the final corridor leading toward ground transfer access. The environment shifted slightly in tone, becoming more controlled and acoustically isolated, with fewer announcements and reduced passenger traffic. Overhead displays cycled through standard operational data, reflecting no anomalies or pending security flags. Lauren's communication device issued a second confirmation tone, indicating that her movement path had been logged as complete for this terminal segment. She did not pause, maintaining steady forward motion as the system automatically synchronized her location across multiple federal and airport coordination databases. Behind her, the Airport Security Operations Center finalized its post-incident review, marking the event as resolved with no procedural violations detected. Officers returned to standard shift rotations, and all temporary monitoring protocols were fully disengaged. The atmosphere inside the terminal stabilized completely, returning to normal travel conditions with uninterrupted passenger flow. Lauren proceeded through the final access threshold, transitioning from the interior terminal space toward the designated departure transport zone, her presence fully integrated into the operational framework without further interruption or scrutiny. The secure transport corridor extended into a quieter external access zone where lighting shifted from bright terminal white to softer perimeter illumination designed for nighttime coordination. Lauren Mitchell continued forward without interruption, her steps steady as she approached the final handoff point for ground transport. A marked vehicle bay was visible ahead, with 2 assigned personnel already positioned beside a black federal transport vehicle, its engine running at idle and its status indicator confirming readiness. One of the personnel stepped forward briefly, performing a standard visual confirmation check while scanning her identification credentials through a handheld verification device. The device emitted a soft confirmation tone, immediately aligning with the airport central clearance database and confirming her unrestricted status. Lauren maintained a calm, composed expression, offering a brief verbal acknowledgement before proceeding toward the vehicle. The surrounding area remained controlled and quiet, with only minimal operational communication audible through the mounted intercom system. Behind her, the terminal structure stood fully stable and operational, with all previous security escalations fully cleared and no residual alerts active in the system logs. Inside the airport control network, automated summaries finalized the incident report, categorizing it as a resolved misidentification event with no further action required. Personnel at multiple coordination points confirmed return to standard duty status, and all temporary overrides were automatically removed from the system. Lauren reached the transport vehicle and paused momentarily as the rear access door unlocked in response to her clearance signal. The interior lighting of the vehicle activated softly, indicating readiness for departure. She stepped forward with steady control and entered the vehicle without hesitation. The door closed smoothly behind her, and the system initiated secure route synchronization with Federal Transit coordination channels. Outside, the airport continued operating at full capacity, unaffected and fully normalized, while inside the transport vehicle, Lauren's mission status updated to active movement toward next assignment parameters. The transport vehicle merged smoothly into the designated secure route lane, leaving the airport perimeter behind as city infrastructure lights began to replace the control terminal glow. Inside the vehicle, Lauren Mitchell remained composed, seated in the rear compartment as onboard systems displayed live navigation data and mission routing updates. The interface confirmed a direct path to the Federal Coordination Center, with no deviations or interruptions flagged along the route. Her posture remained steady, her attention forward, reflecting the same disciplined focus maintained throughout the entire sequence of events. Outside the reinforced glass panels, traffic moved in normal urban rhythm, with no indication that any disruption had occurred earlier at the airport. Law enforcement presence had already fully dispersed from the terminal area, returning all operational zones to standard monitoring status. Internal communications between airport authority and federal oversight confirmed complete closure of the incident file, with automated systems archiving all related data for standard review protocols. Within the vehicle, a soft confirmation tone indicated synchronization with Central Command, followed by an updated assignment notice confirming her active duty continuation without interruption. Lauren acknowledged the update silently, maintaining focus as the vehicle maintained steady speed along the controlled corridor. The environment remained stable, quiet, and fully procedural, with no escalation indicators present in any system feed. As the city lights extended ahead, the transport vehicle continued its uninterrupted route toward the next operational point, completing the transition from airport clearance to federal movement phase under full authorization.